Welcome to the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, your bi-weekly deep dive on technical topics of interest to the radio amateur. And boy, do we have technical topics on today's show. So stand by. Here we go. If this is the first time you joined us, we're really happy you're here. We have over 237 episodes in our back catalog. You can find them on your favorite podcast player or go to our website. If you want to find out more about the podcast, our website is at hamradioworkbench.com. You can also chat with us on our Facebook group, which is called Ham Radio Workbench. You can also join us on our Discord. There's lots of channels on Discord about everything from portable operating to what's on your workbench and other stuff. You can find the Never Expires link on our webpage for Discord. And you can talk to us live and direct on the Brandmeister DMR Talk Group 31075 and All-Star Node 55915. Well, today we actually do have a special guest. Unlike last time when we had semi-special guests, on today's show, we have Roger Coudé. Roger is VE2DBE, and Roger is the author of Radio Mobile Online. And it's a fascinating project, a great useful piece of software we'll talk about, which basically helps you do a path plot on the computer from point A to point B. And it's useful for figuring out repeater coverage areas and terrestrial links and you name it. If you want to figure out if your path is going to work, Radio Mobile Online is the place to go do that. And Roger has been licensed since 1975, just before he got his EE degree. And he has a career in physics as an instructor and also a telecom consulting engineer. And he started building Radio Mobile Online from a professional point of view and has made it freeware since 1997. It's an amazing, generous contribution to the amateur radio world. And as we found out in the pre-show, it turns out that Roger's also an amateur astronomer, like the rest of us nerds here, and he's also a fan of the Hergé cartoon Tintin, so even more nerd cred, since we're all fans of that too. So, couldn't go much better than that. So, Roger, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, it's really cool because I've been using Radio Mobile for quite a while. So I'm just really happy that you can join us. We also have Thomas no, I almost made you a Canadian. Thomas K4SWL. Hey, Thomas.
Yeah, actually, so hopefully in just about a week or so, I'll be using my Canadian call sign of Victor Yankee 2 Sierra Whiskey. So you weren't too far off. You just needed to say Y, so VY2SW. But yeah, things are going well here. There's like a thunderstorm outside, but hey, we're doing well.
Very good. Was that a vanity call, SW?
It was. So it's really cool in Canada. First of all, like your license is for life when you sign up. And I had like the most awesome volunteer examiner when I did my exam, 3 years ago now? Vince may remember because he was the volunteer examiner.
That's right.
And we did it remotely. And I was in a hotel room in Ottawa, and I had to prove that I was in Canada on Canadian soil. And so I just kind of turned my laptop around and showed him the roads outside. We had a really pretty view of the highway. And he's like, I recognize that place. So we were there. But so it turns out like the contacts we have a really close family friends in Prince Edward Island, and PEI does not have a massive ham radio population. So because of that, I actually, with my basic call sign, could get a 2x2 call. And you get to pick like your first call sign, basically a vanity call, because you can pick what you want your suffix to be. And so I was able to do VY2SW with my basic call.
I figured it probably was something like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's nice that you have it's a permanent license. That we should do that here. And
I'm
we
proud
also
of my Canadian call. Yep.
Yeah, as well you should be. We also have a legitimate Canadian with us, not a faux
Really?
Canadian. We have a real Canadian. That would be Vince.
Well,
6LK. Hey, buddy.
We do have two here tonight.
We'll get to that one later.
Good after evening, noon, y'all.
How are you, man?
I'm great. It's awesome.
Yeah. You recovered from hamvention?
I have almost recovered from hamvention. I'm still playing with the Meshtastic node that I unexpectedly bought on a whim. It's a whole lot of fun, actually. So,
are there Meshtastic people in Alberta?
There are. And what I'm finding surprising is the number of Meshtastic users that are landing at the Calgary airport, that their Meshtastic devices are obviously not in airplane mode because they're saying hello from 35,000 feet and flight such and such.
I don't know where the button is to turn that off.
Most people don't.
Well, very good. So we're all back from Hamvention. You all listened to the previous episode where we talked about our Hamvention experience. So I think there's a little decompression going on here, getting back to normal. So what we're going to do here on the show is talk a bit about what's on our workbench first. We'll do a round of that, take a break, and then after that, when we come back, we're going to go into Radio Mobile Online. Now, it turns out that our guest, Roger, is also an amateur astronomer, and he's got some really cool stuff to share on that front that crosses over between radio mobile and astronomy. So
don't
stay
tell them why.
tuned for that. I'm not going to give it away,
No.
but we'll get to that in the latter part of the show. So Roger, as our guest of honor, let's start with you on what's on our workbench. So tell us, what are you working on?
Okay, first of all, it's the season of the year where we can access mountain top repeaters. So I'm preparing a lot of mission or expedition to some remote place. I'm quite involved in the what we call the Réseau Trans-Québec. It's a group of about 40 repeaters linked together permanently on a permanent basis. And about half of them are using old Aerial C1 and Aerial C4, but more and more we try to use All-Star Link software and with PC, so we can do remote maintenance. And when we have bad communication due to defective equipment or bad propagation, we can do a temporary link through a voice over IP link. And I'm quite busy with that. I would say it occupies most of my retirement time. And also work for sure with the as project with astronomy related things, and I'm quite busy. In fact, and I also do a little bit of real work for tower coverage. I try to accommodate them with the new LiDAR data, so we can. They will be able to do microwave study with the real thing.
So is that making the terrestrial database more accurate, or what does that help?
Absolutely. More, as an example, in the United States, almost 80% of the country is done in 1 meter horizontal resolution, and but this is too large to manage and overkill for radio calculation. So what I do is I resample it to 1/9 of an arc, which is about 3 meters between records, and with that, the database dropped to about 2 terabytes for the United States. In Quebec, we have the forest and the government forestry department did the LiDAR for most of the province, and I converted that to usable data, still 1/9 of an arc. And I did that for Nova Scotia, for New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island. Did a little bit of Ontario, but they don't have yet enough available data to continue, because the most interesting part is the isolated area where you don't have fiber optics. And but in Quebec, we are lucky. We have all the interesting place already, and it makes a difference. A lot more precise for, as an example, it's used by the city to calculate the propagation between their 900 megahertz device in the city. So since you have all the building there, it's very good. With normal data we used to have, SRTM or government data was not that precise. But now you can, since you have very precise elevation, you can pretend to do study in the city, which was not very feasible before.
Now, I'm really curious, the data that you have, I know that you don't need it for this whole area, but does that LiDAR data actually cover the entire province of Quebec, like even in the far northern regions?
It goes up to Manicouagan Reservoir above that. So I would say the main purpose was for the forest industry to know where are the trees. So at some point there is no more trees, so they stop it there.
Because Quebec is a gigantic province.
And
I mean, like a lot of Canadian
provinces. Depends on the budget, but it's my elder daughter who is responsible for the geometric department, so I have a good connection.
You have a source. So this is actually turning into the next section of the show, but I have one more question I have to ask. So with the LiDAR data of Quebec, is that in the city? So like buildings and all of that detail?
Yeah. But if I can show you, I think that's the best way to express. I have some picture that I made already. I will try to be fast. Wait out. So, I think I have it there. Yeah, okay. So I will share my screen so you can see, for those who don't have the picture, what we have. Sorry, I did the wrong.
It's okay. It's a great image.
It's a great image of a nebula.
Yeah, you see,
there we go.
This is the downtown.
Oh, wow.
So you see the port, and you see the Mont Royal.
Yes.
And you see this ice scraper here.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is done at 1/9 of an arc, 3-meter resolution.
And for the people that can't see this, it almost looks like an infrared image where like on the red side, you're seeing the higher points there on Montreal and the like mountain that's there. It's kind of showing up in red, and then a lot of the buildings, you can tell how tall they are just based on the colors of it. It's really fascinating and super detailed.
As you can see, where is do you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is Place Ville-Marie, and there is a law that says that they cannot be higher than the top of the Montreal. So you see the red dot on the top of the building correspond to the same color as the mountain.
It's like the check for it. That's fantastic.
I would think that this level of detail would be necessary for any kind of urban radio system.
It's overkill for amateur radio.
Right.
Unless you're doing a mesh network with Wi-Fi or things like that, but most of the calculation, as an example, it doesn't make any sense to do that with the online version dedicated for VHF and UHF.
But if you're doing something like a small cell network or higher frequency point-to-point links, if you want to shoot a point-to-point link between buildings, you want to know if there's another building in the way. So this would be a good way to figure it out.
And so I know that you have a connection for finding this, but is this like publicly accessible data, or is it something that you have to have access to?
No, I use only publicly available data.
Okay.
Free. So USGS for the US. And Quebec government or New Brunswick government, Nova Scotia. I have a little bit in Alberta, not too much. British Columbia. I just, actually I'm working on Texas right now.
Wow.
But, and to have this, you have to use the what they call the LAS, laser altimeter something. And this requires a huge amount of calculation to produce a small area. In Quebec, it's already done. It's already what they call the digital surface model. But the digital surface model is not available yet, not processed in the US, but you can do it yourself with free data with the original laser file. This is what I'm doing now. So it's a lot of work, but it's very interesting. This is really the future of radio mobile.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So I want to come back to this in a little bit. Before we go around the table here, is there any other radio type projects you've got in mind? I mean, not that you aren't already busy enough.
Yeah, I will show you what the main. This is the Facebook group for the radio mobile, the réseau RTQ, the emergency network.
Grow
So,
the
yeah,
image.
can you see?
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
So these are RF link in green, and in red you have the virtual connection. So many sites are both RF and internet. And actually, I'm living here.
Oh, yes.
Near the
Yes,
US
you're a
border.
little south of
Okay.
Montreal.
Yeah. And I can talk to people in Sept-Îles, and
Wow.
there are many repeaters in between, so it may take 2 seconds before your voice reach the other end, but it's working.
So is this all a conventional FM system?
Most of them are VHF repeater for user and backbone in UHF.
Okay.
But
That's a
as
really
an
nice.
yeah.
That's a I mean, for people who aren't familiar with, you know, like the province of Quebec and some of these Canadian provinces, they are massive. Like they're really, like, to drive from one end to another, you know, can sometimes take days for some provinces. And looking just at the green links on this map, which represent the RF links, to be able to like hit something from Montreal and go all the way to Sept-Îles, which is way up the St. Lawrence River, much further than I've ever been on the north shore of the St. Lawrence, is really, really fascinating that you've got RF links that far up. That's a vast distance, really
But
vast distance.
we are very lucky because since we are sponsored by the civilian security, we have access to government side like TV station in top mounting repeater. And so as an example, here Mont Orford near Sherbrooke, we have line of sight with Mont Bel-Air in Quebec. Line of sight, and it's 200 kilometers. So it's quite a long range line of sight link. And we have the same thing here between Gaspésie and Sept-Îles.
Yeah.
Over 200 kilometer link, UHF link.
Out of
But
curiosity, is that one down from, do you have Baie-Comeau in there?
yeah, Baie-Comeau is here.
Yeah. So like 3 years ago when we were in Quebec, my poor family, I kind of subject them to a lot of stuff, but they go along with it because I have a real fondness for like remote places and also radio. And Baie-Comeau had always been on my radar because, first of all, they had at least one very accessible Parks on the Air park there, a POTA park that no one had ever activated for some reason. And I said, I really want to drive up there. And that part of the coast along the northern shore of the St. Lawrence River is really, really beautiful. And there's like whales and everything. It's just a really beautiful place. But you drive up there and you realize just how far out you are. And that's sort of at the beginning of the Labrador Highway, which also goes north into Labrador City and then across into, if you want to, into Labrador and into Newfoundland, if you really want to drive that multi-day trip in the middle of nowhere. And it's a really fascinating place. But when you go up there, you realize just kind of how isolated you really are in that region. That's so cool that you've got a link up there, an RF link.
And I had something about that because one of the reasons why I'm so passionate with radio is myself, I was born in Lac Saint-Jean, which is a very isolated area. And when I was young, there was only one TV station and no FM radio at all. So when we tried to catch FM radio, we had to catch 300 kilometers away station.
Wow.
So that was a quite, but one thing, on the lower part of the band, channel 2 to 6, all the summer we had zillion of American station, one above the other, by skip.
Huh.
So it was impossible to listen to those lower channel in the summer because and the same thing for AM radio, because all the antenna are pointing to the north during the night.
That kind of like forced you into the world of DXing, didn't it?
And when I was driving, I had to drive, as an example, from Lac Saint-Jean to Quebec. We had a 3-hour drive, and there was only one stop in the middle. And in fact, one time I was lost in a snowstorm, and I hit a truck tire, and I broke my suspension, and I was immobilized in the night at -40 in the winter, nobody there. And I was able to catch a repeater, 1S unit.
Oh my God.
Was able to have a being rescued.
That is fascinating.
If it wasn't that, I will be frozen to death.
Wow.
So amateur radio saved my life.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
Thomas, can you top that?
No, I can't.
I was down at the Starbucks and they ran out of milk. And it was awful.
I mean,
their steamer was offline. I had to pour the milk in straight from the bag.
I mean, I've gone that same route he's talking about, from Lac Saint-Jean down to Quebec City. And nowadays, there are a couple of nice way stations along the way. And it's a much bigger road and everything. And I've never done it in the winter. But like, it is a vast distance. It's a beautiful drive. It's a vast distance, though. I mean, I do see that. I've often wondered, because I've always been fascinated with places that are kind of remote, which is the reason I like to travel to those types of places. And I've always wondered, like, with that, I think it's fascinating that it kind of forces you into this world of like everyday DX. Like you kind of DX in order to just do what you want to do, because there's not a lot of infrastructure out there for communications. And I know things have changed a lot, but that's great. I tell you what, I don't know of anybody else that's like can say that one S unit has saved their lives.
See, have you ever used VHF repeaters up in that part of the world?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, actually. So I've joined. No, not up there. Not up near Lac Saint-Jean and Saguenay and that area. I've never done that. But down in Quebec City, I have. In fact, I've gotten on the repeater in Quebec City. One of the repeaters, I can't remember which one before, and I will brave up and do that sometimes. My French, my French is okay when I'm just conversing with people like face to face. On the radio, I get a little nervous because it's like another level of mic shy when I do that. But there's a really nice repeater infrastructure. There's some really great clubs up in Quebec. In fact, hopefully I'll be inviting myself to one of their field days. So, but Roger, like before the show, we were talking too a little bit about like, you are also into astronomy, and I'm really curious if there's a project you're working on right now, because you happen to be like looking at like 3 other astronomy nerds right now in this. I'm sure it'll resonate with some other listeners.
Okay, so for sure, I'm as an amateur radio and amateur astronomer. I made a radio mobile online software for the moon and for Mars, planet Mars. Mars is not that good because the data is not very good, but at least the mechanic is there. But for the moon, we have quite good data from the orbiter, this is the same principle. Why do we need program like Radio Mobile? Because we want to locate unit properly. So you need a rolling map and you want to place your unit where they are. And for sure, the calculation itself is not visible. It's inside the mathematics of the program. But at the end, you want to see the result as a graphical output, either a radio path or a coverage around the site. So that was my goal from the beginning. I think my first prototype of the program in 1988 was already having these important steps, not a rolling map, but at least a map where I can place my unit and radio path visual. When I began my career in the industry, and I was the radio specialist for air defense system, they were using text program to calculate. They were entering the coordinates manually, and they press enter, and they have that many dB as path loss, the original Longley Rice program and all these things. And most of the time, these people, they make a mistake in the coordinates. So the first thing you need is a double check if you entered the coordinates correctly. So I think having a map to place your unit is a requirement. You cannot escape from that. So I did the same for the moon, a rolling map to place the unit, and be able to do a path profile and to do in the case of the moon, I don't do a radio coverage because I do more like a visual coverage, because on the moon the propagation is not the same as on the Earth.
First so it's like line of sight, pretty much.
The radius of the moon is much smaller. So what happens is you lose the horizon very fast.
Right.
And also there is no atmosphere, so there is no refraction. Like when you see the sunset, the sky is red. It means that if somebody can key the light of the sun, you will be able to decode the Morse code message, even if you're not looking at the sun directly, because the air retransmit the light, by refraction and diffraction if it's close to the top of the mountain. But on the moon, there is no such refraction. So what happens if you lose the line of sight, it's very fast, you lose the signal.
So let me ask Roger if
I think we're slipping into rat holes here.
Well, yeah,
Vince, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, that's number one. Roger, if the moon was the same diameter of the Earth, and on Earth, if I'm in the same altitude as the other site, maybe 50 kilometers, I might get 50 watts at 100 feet or 30 meters in the air. How far would my signal carry correspondingly on the moon?
On the moon, it will be much shorter, even if we have the same radius, because what happened is due to the distribution of temperature in the air, on the ground, the temperature is higher at higher altitude, So what happened is this gradient curve the radio wave toward the ground. So it's like the Earth was bigger than it really is.
Wow.
Your signal goes beyond the horizon because it's curved through, it helps, the atmosphere helps to go further, which is not the case on the moon. But you still have some diffraction on the top of the mountain. You still have some energy that is repeated, if you want, by the we call that obstruction loss.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you see high mountains and you have a single obstruction, some of the energy is bent down to the other station. So even if you lose line of sight, you still have a little communication, but not very far. So the moon, that's the difference. You cannot use the usual mathematics that we use on Earth on the moon, that's for sure. And this is the reason why I limited the coverage to visual coverage for the moon.
Oh, wow.
So what you're talking about is edge diffraction when the signal gets to the let's say the ridge of the mountain and some of it is bent over the edge.
It's like it's a physics things, diffraction, but this is happening only with a single obstruction. If you have a double horizon, you don't have that. I mean, if you don't share the same horizon as the other side, you have what we call a double horizon. So in that case, there is no diffraction. You lose it completely. You need only one obstruction to the same obstruction for the two units. At that point you will have more diffraction.
So for those of you going to the moon, you should pay attention because propagation, like if that POTA expedition to the moon will.
The motivation came from an amateur radio who was working for the European Space Agency, and he asked me if I was interested to deliver a software for them. I said, no way, I'm a retired man. I don't want to be subject to milestone and produce report. But I will do it for free and available to everybody.
Can I just say up front that like my workbench stuff's not going to sound nearly as exciting.
I was already thinking the same thing.
Like you go first, George.
That's
really fascinating.
So for anybody who's considering a POTA or perhaps a SOTA expedition on the moon, what I've just heard is you need to bring about 3 times as much RF power as you need on Earth. You need to bring some oxygen and some food, and you better be very fluent at using, a pressurized suit and going to the bathroom and stuff in zero gravity. And you need to hitch a ride home somehow. So
another little story about the program that I made for the moon. After I did it, okay, I realized I made the algorithm to make Panorama, okay? And I realized I do all that. I have that on Radio Mobile as well. You can do panoramic view with the classical version, okay?
So you can sort of see what you're looking at if you were standing there.
Right. But yeah, it's useful if you want to know where you turn your antenna and you rely only on the visibly mountains that you know. As an example, you can use that as to help you. But in the case of the moon, I realized that I can find some public available photo of the astronaut they took from their mission that are on the NASA site. And I was
No, the moon landing is fake. That's what everybody says.
So with the digital data that was created with the orbiter after 2008 or so, okay, I was able to create panoramic view as they were seen by the astronaut where they were, okay? And it's a 1-for-1 exact image.
That is brilliant.
Okay, and you cannot have fake. It cannot be a fake. It's impossible because they didn't knew at that time all it was looking like.
That's lovely.
Of course.
That's great. Oh, man.
Amazing.
Okay, so Thomas, I'm going to ask you at this point to
Thomas is embarrassed now.
Tell us, what kind of silly putty do you have on your workbench? I mean, what's on your workbench, man?
So first of all, that's fascinating, Roger. I love that. Roger. Really, honestly, I've just been insanely busy the past couple of weeks, which is good because it's coincided with some really, really, really terrible propagation. So I have not been out doing activations or anything, or taking radios to the field much while we've been having this really dismal propagation going on. However, there were not this week, but last week, last week, I think it was last week, I did a number of activations and somehow timed it where it wasn't too bad. And I was able to make contacts and things were great. And also this past weekend on Saturday, I got to work. I was very pleased with this. I got to work our friend here of the show, Ara, N6ARA, as he activated a summit to cap off his mountain goat
Oh, cool.
status in the Summits on the Air program. And I was able to work him, which was really wonderful because he's such a great guy. And I did run QRO for that. I had to. The
Yeah.
propagation was horrible. And
Propagation
so
was horrible. The pileup was massive.
it
Rat
was.
hole number two. Ara told me he operated for 6 hours and 15 minutes until the batteries went out, and they were exhausted at the end of it all. But they're on top of a mountain. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that there's a YouTube video. I'll go find it.
Hmm.
But what you have to understand is they're on top of a mountain with no commercial power. They've humped up a Starlink dish. They've humped up 3 video cameras. They're doing 2 video cameras live, and every once in a while they switch to a third one, which is it's a third video camera. Anyway, they've done this massive mountaintop production
It was
to
amazing.
help Ara get to his mountain goat. I'm so very fortunate. I tuned in quite by luck when I was at the candy store, and I saw Ara getting his new goat ear tiara
Oh,
right at that
nice.
moment. I worked him later on in that afternoon. Yeah, QRO like you. Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, it was just, it was the first time I'd used my KXPA 100 amp, and I need to do that every so often. So RO is a really good reason for doing it because Roger, I'm kind of just more of a low power guy most of the time. But yeah, I had to put out, and I was using my Pac Tenna 40 meter infed half wave, though I think I was on 20 meters at the time. So I was, but I was using it, it's resonant on 20 meters as well. And, it was nice working him. The other thing that I've been messing with here recently is Radioddity sent me through Shegu, the company, they have a new antenna called the HF009. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like most antennas that come out these days, and we've probably talked about this before, they're kind of like redesigned versions of the same antennas we've always seen, right? Like there aren't a whole lot of like true novel, like brand new antenna designs no one's ever thought of before. This one is a coil, like a tapped coil antenna. Um, and it's new from Radioddity, and I guess it's from Shegu. Um, and it's the coil is let's see if I can describe this. There's a little slider switch that moves the coil, and it operates, I think, from 60 meters to 6 meters, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but it's pretty wide coverage with this coil and the telescoping whip antenna that's on top. And the coil is kind of mid-mounted on the antenna. There's 2 poles that hold it up pretty high. So it gives you slightly, I think, slightly more bandwidth than if the coil were right on the ground. There are 3 radials on the ground, and I'll be really honest with you. Like, I'm not a fan of this style of antenna. I'm really not. I'm not a fan of sliding tapped coils. And a lot of it's because when I go to the field, I don't want to fiddle with anything. I just kind of want to get on the air. And it's one of the reasons why I like wire antennas. In-fed half waves are very, very forgiving antennas, bandwidth wise and SWR wise. They can be deployed you can almost just throw the thing on the ground and you'll be able to still operate. They're so forgiving. In-fed random wires are just very flexible as long as you have a good antenna tuner. Verticals that I like tend to be things that are quarter waves where you're adjusting the whip, but the whip is pretty reliably set, like you know where to adjust the whip to, and you pretty much reliably get the same SWR. I find that, coil antennas like this with taps on them, they're very high Q. And so it's even when you put it in the right position, if you move it to a different spot, different topography can affect the thing. When you're touching it, it can affect it sort of like with a loop antenna. So if you're tuning it, if you've got I have my little signal stick. Is that what it's called from Rig Expert? Wonderful little device for checking SWR. And I'm holding it, and like anytime you touch the antenna or get close to it, it affects the SWR. But I gotta say that this was relatively easy to tune, and I prefer it over the other coil antennas. I haven't taken it out for an activation or anything yet because I wanted just to test it. But so far, and there have been some YouTubers that have taken it out and done activations and stuff. It's a nice design if you like that type of antenna, I believe. And that's one thing I've been experimenting with one day here when I had a little bit of time. The other thing I've been doing is working on my field kits, trying to get I'm always working to try to have my field kits smaller and more interesting and more self-contained. And I did one for my MTR-3B, the Mountain Topper three-bander. That's the new one called the Curahi from L&R Precision. And basically, I made, and actually, I don't know if my I don't know if my headphone. I keep forgetting that we're doing this on YouTube. I could maybe try to grab this. Here we go. I've got a whole mountain topper kit that is in a waist pack. Or I'll say this, and all my friends in the UK will laugh, but a fanny pack is what we call them here. Um,
It's a red ox bag for those of you on the podcast, on the audio only. Thomas has reached around his over his shoulder to one of the many backpacks hanging on the wall, and he's pulled out a red ox bag. That is not a surprise to any of us here on the podcast. Go ahead.
I love red ox, and basically in this waist pack, I've got literally the whole kit. The only thing I need at all is something to sit on. Now, when you do, and this is for SOTA pretty much. So, SOTA, when I'm not traveling, I'm not going on a really long hike, because when I go on a long hike for SOTA, summits on the air, I have to take provisions like first aid kits, a lot of water, a little food, some emergency supplies when you're going a long, lonely hike. But when I'm going on a pretty easy soda hike that's, maybe a half a mile long or something, I can get away with something really small, especially if it's an area where I've got good cell phone coverage and stuff, and I'm not too worried about tripping and falling and no one finding me for a year, or my body or whatever. I can take a much smaller kit, and this has everything in it, including a knee board, which is and this is a small, a very small waist pack to begin with, but inside of it, my friend Carol N0 RNM years ago, probably 4 years ago, she also bought one of these Red Ox packs, which is they call it the Booty Boss, is the name of it. These are made in Montana. They're awesome. They're not cheap. They're not cheap, but they're also not cheap. Like you'll be passing these on down to your kids and their kids in the
Oh,
future.
they're a multi-generational bag.
100%, 100%. And so this pack I can take to the field, and as long as I have a place to sit, I can put the knee board on my leg, and then I have the entire kit. I have a full throw line. I have an antenna. I have everything I need to take this on 3 bands, which are the 3 bands it covers, 40, 30, and 20. And it's all in just one little small waist pack, which I really love. And so I love doing this sort of thing, and I've been kitting out a few more of my kits. To be honest, plotting and planning for the trip to Canada this summer, because
What's your radio limit?
my so
in cubic feet.
I've already told the family, because we don't know yet if we're taking we may take the cargo box if we decide to do some camping. Roger
Sounds
may
like an
know, but
opportunity to hide radios.
there's a great place that we like to go camping, which is right on the St. Lawrence, and you can watch whales from your breaching from your tent. It's amazing, in a place just north of Tadoussac, and it's just a gorgeous area. If I fill up my cargo box with that, and we take our cargo box, and we have a little extra room, possibly in there, because that'll be all the camping gear, and I can always throw like an extra radio in there because I need spare radios for camping. And then I haven't even looked yet in the spare tire compartment of our new Outback, our new to us Outback, to see what kind of room I have in there. But I've told the family already, only 1 bag per person. So I have to really carefully
Well,
pack away
I,
more
I
radios.
I think your wife and daughters already know about the spare tire trick. So you're gonna have to go to one of those stereo install shops that wink, wink, nudge, nudge might put hidden compartments in cars to create a new hidden compartment.
I'm going to transfer a headrest field kit into the Subaru so that I've got one right there that I know of, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in there, and I'm ordering a new one from Blue Ridge Overland Gear. They make these headrest kits that are so awesome. They just kind of Velcro to the back. You put a little, sort of like a little strapping system around your headrest of your car, and then you attach this pack to the back of it, and it's using this space no one uses, like, that's right there, and it's handy.
Only in a collision. I'm just going to point that
out. Well, it acts as like an extra airbag.
Because if somebody flies forward, right, their face hits the back of that radio pack, which is not what the automotive designers intended.
But you see,
so why does your daughter's face look like a Pentec radio? It kind of in concave. I don't understand. How did that happen?
You've read the specs, haven't you? That the TR35 from Pentec is really good at absorbing, someone's head when it comes. So it's actually a benefit.
2 Gs of impact at 85 miles an hour.
So the reason why they're laughing at me, Roger, is because last time I went to Quebec, I told the family only one pack each. We're all going in one car. When we're kind of minimalist travelers anyway, and I was going to limit it to one radio for myself until I discovered just how much room I could fit in my little tiny QRP radios in and around the spare tire area underneath the floor of the trunk area. So.
Well, Thomas, you do know if you lift up the spare tire that most of those donut spares, there's room underneath the center where the wheel is, the rim.
I was thinking about taking out the whole spare.
You could probably fit an FT710 in there, a 7300 or something.
I could take one of my old Argonaut. Yeah, one of my Argonauts. But so yeah, that's what I've been working on, trying to fix up some of the field kits. I'm hoping to get a little bit of POTA in this upcoming weekend. I'm hoping to get a little bit of time out there. My partner in crime, Vlado N3CZ, is back from Europe. He's been to Macedonia and Spain. And so I can probably grab him and take him out to the field and do a little POTA. It has been, for anybody who's been out doing any kind of on-the-air activity, including just from home or whatever, you've probably noticed that at least at time of recording this, we've had some of the worst propagation I've ever experienced. There have been times when I've scanned the bands and there's just like almost nothing there because the ionosphere is so messed up. So yeah, sometimes those are good times to do other things like build out your field kits.
Yep, that's totally true. Yeah, the bands have just been awful, but anyway.
Okay, you guys, wait a minute. The bands are dead. Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy, or did you guys actually get out there and make some RF?
There's a solar storm, and the indices suck. But I mean, there's still contacts can be made. They're just further between.
All right.
So Vince, while you're at it here, what's on the bench?
Well, three or four things I'll talk about here. In the Canadian licensing system, Thomas was talking earlier about the way that call signs are assigned in Canada. It's essentially a vanity system. We can take out as many call signs as we wish. We simply pay another licensing fee, and the first one is free. It's the gateway drug. And all of the rest of them are $60 each, but they're assigned to you for life. So that's the way our call signs work up here. Now, they've just released a new radio information circular, or what us Canadians call RIC, RIC1. And RIC1 outlines some changes to the way examinations are conducted. And these take effect on the 15th of July, which is coincident with the new basic question pool that is being released on that date. So there's a few changes. For those of us like myself who do remote exams, we are no longer geographically restricted to whom we provide an exam. And that examinee must, and I must, be in Canada at the time of the exam. So the piece about being in Canada was always sort of smoke and mirrors, in my humble opinion. It's difficult to nail down where that is. Apparently, it's written in part of the Communications Act, which is the act that governs everything else, the amateur service, the family radio service, etc. So now they're spelling it out very clearly. You must be in Canada. So I thank them for that. For all my American friends that say, but it doesn't say anywhere, I want a Canadian license. Yeah, well, you got to be in Canada. That's what they tell me. And they won't allow me to give it to you unless you are in Canada. So it's very clearly defined now. I welcome that. The other change is that they've given candidates who are writing the basic test a learning aid. Normally you walk in with a blank sheet of paper. And now the learning aid has on it the standard receiver and transmitter block diagrams, but the boxes are blank.
Oh.
So it's giving you a visual aid to help you remember. These are, it's important questions. And for our US friends that are listening, or perhaps our British or Australian friends that are listening, in the Canadian system, a basic exam is 100 questions long. 42% of that exam is regulatory, half of which is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, questions of that sort. And the rest is pure technical with regulation thrown in. It's a technical exam, and it's equivalent to the U.S. General, but it's twice as long. So it's 3 times as long. As a matter of fact, the U.S. General is only 35 questions. So these changes are really super positive changes. I'm really, really glad to see them. They also have an outline of how they want examiners to conduct remote exams, and I'm really happy to see this. The process that I was the first to develop in Canada for remote exams when the pandemic hit. And I met with ISED 2 years ago, and I know ISED consulted with several other remote examiners as well. And they've taken all of our consideration in, and now they've spelled it out in the document. So I really welcome these things. These are really positive changes for the Canadian licensing system. So that happened, and that happened just this past week.
Yeah.
I have a rat hole question for you. This is rat hole number what?
4.
What number? 4. Thank you. Why is it, let's say if I want to go to Canada and I want a Canadian license, why can't I take the exam in the US and then I'll have my license when I get there? I know you said it can't be done, but why is that?
Because the Radio Communications Act and other services in Canada, it's to make sure that the amateur service is the same as the other services, the aeronautic mobile service, for example. Et cetera, et cetera. So it's for compliance and level playing field across the services.
Okay, that makes sense. And I got to say, like, from having, it's still being relatively fresh on my mind about taking the Canadian exam, for people who are interested in doing it, like if you live in another country and you travel to Canada enough that you really want to have your own call sign. I stay there long enough that I wanted to have my own call sign. And we happen to have really close family friends that live there, so it was pretty easy to have them receive the mail and do everything, officially. And the time that you need to, if you've passed the equivalent kind of technician and general class or basic level courses in your own country, you'll find, like Vince said, a lot of it's common sense. Then you've got some regulatory stuff, and you've got some electronics theory and things like that. It is quite different from the U.S. exam, though. Like even the technical stuff, I think, focus a lot more on even block diagrams and some other things than the U.S., if I'm remembering correctly, more than the U.S. did. And the U.S. maybe focused a little bit more on some components. But the real killer with the Canadian exam is the question pool is 1,000 questions for the basic. 1,000. That's your and so your exam is 100 questions. So if you get 96 of them right, you have a 96%. And so, you need more time to take the test. You have to really study the test a lot more because guaranteed, I mean, this is the same thing. I also hold a UK license, and there are differences between frequency uses and all kinds of other things between all these countries, and it's easy to get those a little bit confused. So you really need to spend some time studying to do the Canadian exam. Don't go there just kind of confidently thinking, oh, I'm an extra in the US, and so this will be easy peasy for me. No, you really need to sit down and study it a little while, but it's a great exam, and it's a great place to certainly have a license. And it's so great that it's for life. There's really just like almost no cost, and you do have this option of picking up extra call signs in provinces where you're going to be spending a lot of time. If you really want to, as Vince said, you can add those on. You just pay another one-time fee to do that.
Yeah. So, historically, the system was an assigned call sign only. And so if you should happen to work anybody who has a 2x3 Canadian format call that begins with the letter A, VE2A something, that's an assigned call. And that person has been around a really long time. That's really what that means. We can get a 2x2 call up here in provinces that are highly populated after 5 years. So, I've had my 2x2 call for 17 years, and I don't hold a candle compared to some of these guys who've been around forever. I'm still not eligible for a membership in QCWA the way I understand it. So anyway, that's the change in the Canadian exam system, and that was great news to receive this week. Hey, I took some time when I was down at Hamvention. I saw a few things that kind of caught my eye, and here I am on video now showing off my latest design that is out on Thingiverse. We went out as a group on the day after Hamvention shut down, and we played POTA at a park, and I saw this product called the Spool Tenna. Now, I've seen various forms of things on a spool. The Spool Tenna is really very nicely designed. These fellows were sitting at their table right beside me at 4 Days in May when I was at vendor night. And the spool, what struck me about it was the spool is nice and small. And it's really easy to unwind the wire and put the wire back on it. So I thought to myself, well, there's a good idea. I mean, the wheel is not a new idea, neither is the shape round, the shape that I'm in, for those of you that recall. But the thing that I wanted to do was I was looking for a coax spool for RG174 coax, because that's what I use when I'm out in the field. And I use RG174 because it's nice and lightweight, and I can throw it in my bag and it doesn't weigh everything down. Yes, I pay a higher price for loss. I get it. And that's fine. That's a choice I'm consciously making. But I couldn't find a spool. And so what I found on Thingiverse was somebody else who had designed a spool, and now I'm starting to get a little more fluent in 3D modeling software, Tinkercad specifically, that I was able to take the design of a spool that somebody made up to, wind 50 feet of hose and slice off the center core and the one side of it. And I took the flat panel, then I shrunk it down to the dimension I needed. And the spool that I've landed up designing, with proper attribution to the original source, of course, is 4 inches across and 1 inch thick. And it holds 35 feet of RG174. It'll probably hold 50 if you wind it neatly. Very neatly, I might add. There's a whole lot of math involved in figuring out how many layers of wire you can wind on a spool, as it turns out. Thank you, Dave N3NIK, for educating me on that during one of our remote exam sessions that I was doing down in the States. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, so I've put that design out on Thingiverse, and I put a link to that into the show notes if you're interested in printing one for yourself. That design is out there for people to use.
So now, Vince, two questions. The first question about that one, it looks like you got a hole in the center of it. Yeah. I'm guessing that hole's big enough you can throw a pencil through that, sort of like with the spool tenna, so that you can spool it out really quickly.
Yeah, totally. There's a hole in the middle, but I purposely designed the hole to be big enough to fit my finger through.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have to use a pen.
Wow, cool.
So in scuba diving, we call this a finger reel. because it's intended for use while underwater if you have to spool out a line, and you can get at it with your finger. So I can put my index finger in on one side, and there are openings along the sidewall where I can put the tip of my finger in and spin it around. So I don't need a crank handle on it.
That's a really nice design. And so, out of curiosity, the POTA activation that you were referencing there, is that the one that I saw the video of where you guys were assaulting the tree? I'm wondering what the tree did to you guys, first of all, to deserve that kind of punishment that I saw in that video.
I know nothing of the tree of which you're speaking.
Was George punishing the tree? Was it your fault, George?
I cannot tell a lie. I don't know what you're talking about. We strategically placed the end of the antenna in the tree in such a way that made it impossible to get it out without 4 people and 6 poles and a lot of 4-letter words. And eventually we did get it dislodged, but it was not easy. No trees were harmed in the making of that video.
No trees were harmed in the making of that POTA activation, but potty mouth was used to access it about that moment in time.
It was, I have to be honest, that gave me pure joy to see that.
Thanks, buddy.
My kingdom for a throw line and rope that slides through the crook of a tree. So, hey, related to that 3D spool, I have created damage to my new 3D printer. And now what you're seeing on video is a blob of plastic and the hot end, which is the end that is hot, where the plastic squirts out.
That's why they call it that.
That's why they call it that. And I went away at lunchtime yesterday for a little bit, and I came back only to discover my print had dislodged from the build plate. I later discovered that I was in a rush and I neglected to properly, in software, make sure it was going to stay on the build plate. I just kind of dropped the object there, and I forgot the whole lay flat thing that Mrs. Zafiropoulos taught me. So anyway, that caused my hot end to have a backup of Orwellian proportions. And I landed up needing to make an emergency trip to spool3d.ca, which is fortunately only 25 minutes north of me. And for the small paltry sum of 36 Canadian dollars, I bought not one but 2 spare hot ends. So now I have one spare hot end on hand and one to look at as an ugly testament to my screwing up. I said to the fellow behind the counter, dude, do you want this as a demonstration piece of what not to do? He says, oh, no. And he reaches under the counter and he pulls out hot ends. And one of them, I swear, it weighed 2 pounds. And the print was about 2 inches thick at the time. And then the print lost stiction on the build plate. And it had all kinds of just stuff overflowing. And this stuff just looks like molten lava when it overflows. So, hey, finally, I've got a link to this reference now in the show notes as well. I finally got time to catch up on groups.io and the zBitx forum around the zBitx. And while we are all anxiously awaiting any kind of software fixes or build fixes, it is a user-supported community. And so that means I had to take and throw a little caution to the wind, and I had to learn a little bit of Unix or Linux for Raspberry Pi, and I applied a fix from N3JZD. Thank you very much, Jody, for posting that fix and telling us what we had to do to apply it and copy files over and rename other files and then redo the build. I don't grep Nix at all, and the Nix nerds in the audience are rolling their eyes at my bad joke. But it made my CW experience with this thing a whole bunch better. I've got the QSK speed down to 50 milliseconds, and it really is buttery smooth. So I'm really looking forward to getting the radio out and putting it through its paces. I've got some business travel coming up. I'm traveling 6 degrees of latitude north from my home this coming weekend, so it's a hell of a drive. And I'm sure there's going to be an unactivated POTA entity along the way that will no longer be unactivated by the time I pass by it. So,
Good for you.
hey man, that's what I got going on. Not much at all, right? Hey George, what's going on?
I'm getting over Hamvention. And so the best way to get over, isn't it like if you've been drunk, the best way to get over it is have another drink? Well, coming back from Hamvention, the equivalent is going to CPAC on the coast. So right after Hamvention, we packed up and went to CPAC, which is a load of fun. It's a nice local show, great turnout. I had the chance to do a presentation with Mike, our buddy VN3MW. We did a talk on remote operating, and it was absolutely packed. The room wasn't very big, which may be part of the reason, but we had a standing room only, and it was really great. A lot of interest in that topic. It was a great chance to hang out with the guys from Flex and the guys from Elecraft, and just kind of chat about stuff, and that was really great. So that was good, and I did my first official POTA this year at the Lewis and Clark State Recreation Site, which is not too far from where I'm at. And my friend Alan and I went there, and we each did about a dozen contacts. And so we activated the park, which was great. That was the maiden voyage of my brand new Yaesu FTX1. So I was playing around with the radio in the shack for a while, and then I thought, well, it's got to go to the field sometime. And so that was the trip to the field. And so I operated it with the amp and the tuner as a 100-watt radio, class radio. I have many observations, probably more than we have time to go through here, but there's, like with any radio, there's pros and cons. And any new radio that ICOM or Yaesu or any of these big manufacturers put out is always going to be a great radio. So you can't say it's a bad radio. Yeah. So now we're into arguing over second order effects. Do you like the color of the knob? I mean, we're kind of down into that zone. Things about the radio that I was very impressed with is the digital noise reduction is excellent.
Really?
So it's really excellent. A lot of radios have that as a feature, and you turn it on and it makes maybe a little bit of difference. But Yaesu's really got that figured out. So I think they're extremely good with that. The tuner's pretty good inside. It has 2 HF antenna ports, which is great to AB antennas. That's kind of a bonus that you weren't looking for. The thing is pretty easy to disconnect the head from the rest of the body. I think they missed a design technique there. I think I mentioned this before. There's like 5 cables you have to disconnect, which is not a big deal. But it would be better if they were pogo pins. It would be just slick if you can snap it together and not have to do the cables, but it is what it is. It feels great, very high quality Yaesu, solid build. It's a real radio. So that's all great. In the not so great column, probably the biggest disappointment is the thing is a real power hog. So on transmit, transmit at about 90 or 100 watts, it draws over 20 amps, which is kind of what you would expect. So 100-watt radio, 20 amps, par for the course. But at 50 watts, the thing draws 15 or 16 amps. So almost as much power as 100 watts, but at 50 watts, it's drawing 15 plus amps. But it gets worse. So you go down to 5 watts, and this is with the amplifier. This is not the head by itself. So I've yet to measure that. But the whole thing, running 5 watts, the thing draws 6 amps, which is nuts.
Wow.
And it's not the display and it's not the receiver, because the radio by itself in receive is drawing it less than an amp. So it's not that. It's really the PA is super inefficient. And that's not uncommon for 100-watt radios. The power consumption is never linear with the power output. It just isn't. Nobody's radios are. But
if it's not linear, why do they call them linear amps?
Well, because that's another.
That's rat hole number 6. Go ahead.
It's linear on the RF. It's not linear on the current. So if you pick any 100-watt radio and dial it down to 5 watts, it's not gonna use 20% of the current it did at 100 watts. It uses significantly more. But this is really way significantly more. Anyway.
In SSB mode?
Well, a key down in CW, just get a constant
Okay, CW.
current measurement. I mean, in all fairness, most of the time we're operating sideband in CW, so 50%, it's not 20 amps, it's 10 amps on the average. So you can cut all that in half. So in that respect, not so bad. But in the absolute, it seemed kind of high to me. So I'm really there's some other things about it. I mean, it's big. It's I'm trying to figure out who this radio is made for, because I mean, it's made for people like me who have to buy the new radio. I mean, I think I'm the target market, but that passes in time. I don't know who this is for, because if you wanted an HF 100-watt luggable radio that weighs 10 pounds, there's radios that are half the price that are just as good from Yaesu. If you wanted a all mode, all band radio, you could get something that's almost as good with a 991. If you wanted a head size QRP radio with all the bells and whistles, you can get a 705. I mean, there's a lot of, I think all of those radios in a way are, well, they're certainly cheaper, and in some ways better or worse. So I'm really kind of not sure. Like, as a portable operator, when I take the head off, I think, man, this thing is really heavy. I mean, I thought the 705 was heavy. This is like a pound more than the 705, and it's bigger. So it's like, this is really heavy. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's really the radio for me. So I'm being new to it. I want to give it a fair shake. So I'll take it out and I'll continue to use it. And I may not use it for a while and come back to it and kind of see how it goes, because sometimes you change your mind. But
did you the one thing that I read about with the FTX1, because when I went to Hamvention and I saw it in person, I canceled my reservation, but that has a lot more to do with the fact that I just looked at the form factor and I thought I just won't end up using this very much because of the type of operator I am. I assumed it would be a good performer. I assumed that all the other things would work really well, and the fit and finish looked great on that radio. But it's just a me thing more than anything else, as just my particular operating style. But the one thing that was a little disappointing, if I understood it correctly, I'd read that several people had reported how difficult it is finding like a battery bank or something that will actually charge the battery on the FTX1 when you have the head removed and you've got the battery attached to it via USB-C. That USB-C connection, you need something that's a power delivery that's really high wattage or something like, it's difficult to find a battery bank that can actually charge the thing, or a connection, that you've plugged into the wall. Have you tried that yet?
I did charge the battery. So when you have just the radio, to be clear, and you disconnect the amplifier, you snap the battery on the back. It looks like a big camcorder battery, if you remember camcorder batteries. Right. So it's kind of like that. It slides on, snaps in, which is a perfectly fine design. And it's pretty big. It's 6,400 milliamp hours, so it's pretty beefy. And there's a USB jack on it. So I just disconnected it from the radio and plugged it into one of my USB-C chargers, and I just charged it. It had no problem.
And all of it worked anyway? Okay.
Yeah, it worked fine. 100% charged, no problem at all. So I think it's just a matter of if you have a power delivery charger, then no problem. If you don't have power delivery, you have USB-C, will it charge it without power delivery, or if it does, it'll just take a long time? So maybe that would work, I think. But I had no problem because I had a charger that would work with it. So I don't think that's really an issue. I think there's a lot of other first order problems I think that's pretty minor.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, the jury's out. Honestly, I played with it quite a bit over the last week and tweaked a few things, understood the menu system and all that. My gut feeling is I'd rather use my 705 rather than the FTX1 Field. Partly because it's smaller and lighter, which is kind of funny because it ain't that small and it ain't that light, but relatively speaking, I think the ICOM UI is much more intuitive, and you can pop around doing things faster on the ICOM than I can on the Yaesu. I found, once I figured out the menu system, I found it's cumbersome to switch between the different things you do, like switch bands, switch modes, change output power, all that stuff. You can do all that, but it's like you have to press the multi knob, then you got to rotate the knob to get to the next menu screen, and then land on the thing you want and press the button again, and then you got to select the thing you want and press it. It's like it's not complicated. It's easy to learn, but there's a lot of twisting and pressing going on the ICOM. It just seems like I can get to those features faster with fewer button presses. One other design flaw, I think this is like, no one's going to care about this but me, but on the top of the radio in Yaesu fashion, there's like 7 buttons, right? That goes all the way back 20 years ago to the 818 and 817 and all those. So there's like the VFO memory button, there's the band button, there's the mode button, and that's great. There's like 4 more buttons up there that I will never in a million years use. And there are things like the wires group monitor button or the whatever. I mean, if you're a Fusion guy, yeah, you'd probably love it. I'm not a Fusion guy, so I will never use those buttons. And those are very precious real estate because those are the only physical buttons on the radio. If I were designing this thing, I would take all 6 or 7 of those buttons, I'd make them programmable. They would come default from the factory some way, but I would want to be able to reprogram those buttons to do the 5 things that I want to get to all the time, the way I operate the radio. And so they're wasted on me. I mean, it's really unfortunate. So it's really Yaesu's way to reinforce the fact that they're the Fusion guys and you should use Fusion. And so I'm going to stick it right on the top of the radio, whether you like it or not. And I don't use it. I mean, if they were common, if everybody used those buttons like, power output mode, et cetera, then yeah, that'd be awesome. But they don't do that. So anyway.
How's the audio?
The audio is, there's 2 ways to look at the audio. There's the sound quality and the amplitude. So it's pretty loud. I saw Mike Cade MRD did a bunch of videos where he was very impressed with the volume of audio. Like he was really blown away. And being like a heavy metal dude, if Mike thinks it's loud, it must be pretty loud. So I'll go with that. It seemed pretty loud to me. So that was good. Points for that. The quality of the audio I thought was fine, but I'm A-Bing it to my 705. I think the 705 sounded better.
Yeah, I like the 705 audio.
I don't know. I can't describe what it is. I felt like the Yaesu felt a little harsher. The other thing I want to carp about, I don't want to make this like a big ding on Yaesu because it's at the end of the day, it's a great radio. These are all little things, but like on the spectral display, you can't really control the color of the spectral display very well. So you can go into the thing and there's like 16 presets and you could pick one of those color combinations to change the color of the spectral display, but they don't let you do it like ICOM. Sounds like a big ad for ICOM, like ICOM does. The thing I like about the 7300, the 9700, the 705, on the spectral display, you can set the color for the edge of the waveform and you can set a different color for the body of the waveform. So what I like to do is I want to see the edge of the waveform and not the body. So I make the edge like a bright green and I make the body of the waveform black so it just disappears. And I find that very, very easy to see. On the Yaesu, you can't do that. So you're stuck with the colors of the body of the waveform and the, and the edge, and there's no color combination that I found particularly useful. So there's that. So that's purely a George aesthetic thing. I think the ICOM is much better that way. And I just got noticed that the Bluetooth transmitter thingy is on the way. So we'll see how the Bluetooth works. The Bluetooth on the 705 is great. I can pair anything to it. We'll see how it works with the Yaesu. I did get the Yaesu earbud thingy, so that'll work, but not sure about anything else. So here's the net of it. If you look at the radio and you look at the size and the features and everything, and you go, man, that seems like the thing I want. It will be great. It'll be a great radio for someone that wants what it is. I'm just not sure that's me. Because for like a base station-y radio, maybe it's good, but it would be more expensive than like a 7300 or a 710, or any of those radios will be half the price and just as good. For a portable operator, it's way too big and heavy. I mean, for the head, you know, way too big and heavy. I'll never take that portable. So that
I didn't think it was that much bigger than a 705. It's
it
like
is.
an inch wider and a quarter inch taller.
So Vince, a half an inch makes an enormous difference in the right circumstances. Let me just put it there. So the thing is the same depth, it's the same height, but it's a half an inch wider. It is definitely heavier. So
For sure.
it
But it's got a bigger battery.
well, yes and no. It's got a bigger battery if you want to run 5 watts. If you if you want to run 10 watts, which I always do, you're going to need an external battery anyway. So you get the same problem as the 705. So you're going to bring the external battery anyway. I
Right.
suppose you can say, well, I'm going to leave off the Yaesu battery and just plug it into an external battery, and then that'll save me that weight.
Yeah.
And it'll
Right.
be a little bit shallower, which would make it a little bit more attractive.
So thank you for falling into my trap. My first reaction when I saw the FTX one at the Yaesu booth was, my goodness, this is a big radio. Now, to be fair, when I saw it, it had the Armalock enclosure or the Yaesu enclosure around it. So I had to mentally subtract that out. And then when I got back to the candy store, I really took a look at the 705. I went, yeah, the radio is not that much bigger than a 705. But yeah, that half inch matters for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
the mistake they made was one of the Yaesu reps from Yaesu USA did a long kind of podcast thing on YouTube where he was talking about the radio before he actually had it in his hands. And for comparison, and he gave proper dimensions when he did it, but for comparison, he was talking about the FTM or the FT 500D.
Oh,
Is that it? The one I have here actually in my shack
mhm.
that you can't see because it's above the camera, but their VHF-UHF, kind of their flagship of their mobile radios. And so all of us that have those look at it and think, oh, wow, that is an attractive size of a radio. Like, I mean, I know it's slightly bigger, slightly deeper, but like when he was talking about it and you were imagining it, you were just imagining a much smaller unit. And when I went there, I remember it was Friday of Hamvention. I'd just come in from the flea market and it was like 9 o'clock, the doors had opened. And I went straight to the Yaesu booth because I had this on order with DX Engineering or reserved. And I saw it and I was like, wow, this is bigger than I thought. And I came back with my phone to make just a short video talking about it, just to kind of show people how it looked, because a lot of us were having a hard time deciding on the size of it. And as I was recording it, I could hear numerous people around me saying, wow, that's bigger than I thought. I mean, you could just hear all these people saying that. And I think it's just because their expectations were that it was going to be a smaller radio to begin with. So then when they saw it and it was like 705 size, and for whatever reason, it just looks bigger than the 705, even though when you compare them side by side, they're super, super close to size.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably one of the reasons that, and when you look at the costs and everything else, that there are going to be a subset of people like me who are less interested in it. But I do think it's going to be a really good radio. I'm sure it'll have really good market longevity. I think that people who really love this radio for doing things like APRS and stuff, you can't do that with the 705. That's really cool. But the 705 to me is, like you said, George, is kind of the sweet spot. And I in my head was comparing it to it because I was looking at the models that they had out on the floor there at the Yaesu booth. And when you put the little Bluetooth thing on and the little GPS thing on, I got dangly bits on it that I don't really care to have on my radio. Whereas inside the 705, you've already got the GPS built in and you've got the Bluetooth built into it. And so in my head, I was thinking, I'm not going to use this because I would use my 705 over this. And I don't even use my 705 that much in the field, even though it's a superb radio. I just don't use it in the field too much for me. But those are really good insights. I've been waiting for you to share your thoughts on it after you took it out.
I really wanted to love it. You mean at that price, you
You do.
you better. It took selling 3 radios to fund buying this one. So I was really like putting my eggs in a basket here. So I was hoping that it would be just like a super delight. And I would say at this point, I don't think there's a disappointment in it at all. But I also don't walk away going, oh man, this is like the be all end all.
Yeah.
So
And at that
I,
price point, you kind of hope to do that.
yeah.
It's a premium.
So I think the person that would really like this radio is if someone said, okay, I want something like an FTDX10 or FT710 or something. I mean, no, they're a little different, but something in that range. I want something in that category, and I want the once in a blue moon option to snap the head off and take it to the field and run QRP from, walking 50 feet to the park bench. I think for that person, this is probably the perfect radio. I don't think there's anything else like it. But you can also create that experience with more money, I suppose, if you had bought 2 radios. But I mean, if you look at the price of the 705, what are they, Vince? How much are they selling for now? They were about 13 last time I looked.
Hey, they hire me at the candy store for my good looks, not because I can remember prices.
All right, somewhere around there. So $1,300, for another 500, you get the 100-watt amplifier. So it's really it's not. I don't think the price is that outrageous at all.
No, it isn't.
So I think it's pretty fair. Plus, guys are comparing this to when they bought their 857 21 years ago, and it was half the price. Well, do the inflation calculation. So
Yeah.
So I think the price is really not outrageous at all. But if it turns out, just to kind of put a pin in it, if the head was the size of the FTM 500 head or somewhere halfway in between, I think it would be more appealing. I think it's just a little too big, a little too heavy to be portable. To
be portable only.
Yeah. Now, if you're taking your 100-watt radio to the field, 7300, FT991, those are all 9-pound radios, 10 pound. And by the way, I misspoke the last episode. I said that this radio is 11 pounds. I misread it. What I was remembering was the weight of the head and the weight of the entire thing. And I was thinking the entire thing was just the amp. So I misspoke. So I was off by probably 2 pounds. So I think the whole enchilada plugged together, the head and the radio is about 9.5, 10 pounds, which is really the same as a 991, which is kind of the same as a 7300. So,
yep.
Size and weight, that's really a push. You can't complain about that.
Yeah, right on.
So there we go. So what's on my workbench is ruminating over the FTX, and I'm hoping I fall in love with it. I just haven't, it could be, by the way, last thought, it could just be my, naivete. And I'm so used to the ICOM UI, and, even though I've got an 891 and I've used other Yaesus, when I go to use this guy, it's like, it's a whole nother thing, and it's not the same thing. Therefore it's not as good, but that's just like, new radio syndrome.
So I still have new radio syndrome. I'll tell a quick story here before we take the break. I still have reservations about my KX3. So this is going to come as a shock to everybody hearing this. I love my KX3, but the interface drives me crazy. And I appreciate all of the reasons that the interface is designed exactly as it is. I spent an awful lot of money on a radio with a monochrome LCD display. I really wanted a colored display. I really didn't want to have to press buttons 2 and 3 times to get a single function. But that's what I got. So I've learned to embrace it as I have my venerable FT857s. With all their quirks, they drive me crazy to use, but I'm used to them. They're comfortable.
I think so. That's wise. I mean, this is the same point that Rod and I used to always talk about, which is how many of us take the time to really learn our radios? I mean, we all know enough to power it up and press the button, but how many people really sit down there and understand every feature? And then very few. And I think you only get you fully enjoy the radio when you spend enough time with it to kind of understand it, and then that learning curve goes away, and it's like no big deal because you know how to use it. But like when I look at the KX3, even though it doesn't have those like modern glitzy features, I can say, that's okay because it is a better, it's a better CW radio. I mean, by any measure.
Yep. I do the same thing. That's okay because
the spotting, the filtering, the solid state TR switching, like all of that is like, but it's so much better at this.
Yeah, totally.
My expectation with the FTX was like, oh, it's going to do everything. and how well does it do everything? And the jury's out.
Yeah, indeed.
Alrighty, so with that brief introduction, we're going to take a break, and hopefully, Roger, you're still there. You're still with us, aren't you?
We can see.
No problem.
We can see us on video.
We'll be right back. So, Roger, I want to start out our conversation to describe what Radio Mobile Online is, and maybe let me take a shot at it and see how close I get, because I've actually used Radio Mobile Online for a while. And by the way, I should probably say first off, I want to really thank you for doing this, because it's obviously a lot of work, but to keep doing this and to make it available free of charge for ham radio operators is a fantastic service. And when I found it, I thought, wow, this is amazing. So anyway, a big thank you. Let's just start with that to kick things off. So what I used Radio Mobile Online for when I moved from California to Oregon, of course, I don't know the terrain. And there's some local repeaters that I want to be able to get into, and some friends, and I want to see if I have simplex range between us. And so having an application like yours to be able to map between two different geographical coordinates and then see a cross-sectional plot of the path and any obstructions in the way of that path is really important. So I use it for exactly those reasons, to figure out the coverage of the repeater that I put up, and also the repeaters I was trying to get into. So in a nutshell, for those of you who may not know who are listening to this, Radio Mobile Online is a website where you can go and put in locations and do a path plot and figure out what the link budget is. In other words, is it possible on this frequency with this much power to send a signal from point A to point B, given the curvature of the Earth and the obstructions like mountains and stuff like that in the way. So it's just super useful. So with that as kind of my simplistic introduction, how close was I to accurate?
Oh, it's a good start. Let's say that the software itself existed since a long time before the online version, but it was more professional tools than easy to use for non-technical people. And also, it was Windows dependent. So people would like to do studies who were using Macintosh or other platform, Linux. It was more difficult for them. And also, with the original version, you have to download huge amount of data to be able to do practical studies, especially if you're responsible for a province network or a state network. It will require a lot of on-disk files. So the online version came in when I retired. I needed a project to keep me busy. And for a long time, I was, as an example, I was attending a Wi-Fi Congress, and people asked me, would you work with us? I say, I'm too busy with my professional actual job, and I cannot do more, sorry. But when I retired, I had all the time to think about that, and I began with Dennis at LinkTex, who is now tower coverage. He offered me the access to a computer for service online, and I began to do some prototyping. I was not at that time. I was not a very good. I didn't have a very good knowledge of server side stuff. I was more like I was able to do HTML page. For sure, I was able to do program in C and Visual Basic. But on the server itself, with the dynamic calculation and dedicated to a client application, on the user side. Finally, after a few months, let's say, I had a prototype that was quite good, and for sure it was interesting, no, because you could use a tablet, whatever, a phone. You can do it with a phone. You can do a study with a phone. So it was a huge step in easiness of usage. Also, the original version was quite technical, was able to do things that do not interest amateur radio operator much. The kind of what if question that you have in amateur radio is not the same as a professional engineer in microwave or whatever, the professional communication specialist. So first thing to know is that the online version is a very, very simplified version of the classical version. A lot of the values that are inside are hidden to the user. They are choices that I made for them. So it helps in reducing the amount of knowledge to use the program. And now I have a new version I'm working. In fact, it's available only here in Quebec for the Quebec Federation of Amateur. It's a Linux server base instead of Windows servers base. And I recompiled the code in native Linux. So it's a PHP based server who is doing the graphical access, and all the calculations are transferred to executable in native Linux, who does only the calculation. And that make a bomb compared to the site you know, the ve2dbe.com site. And my hope is to be able to spread that new kind of server for those organizations that are interested to host a radio mobile server. And when I did that version, it's even simpler. Less button, less option. So the idea is, you know where you want to put, as an example, let's speak on the basic, okay? The model is point-to-point. A radio path is always a point-to-point. Even if you're doing a coverage, it will be millions of point-to-point that will be used, but the calculations are always point-to-point. And for that, you need two locations. So this is what I call the site, okay? And you can define site, which comprise the latitude, the longitude, and the elevation. That's all. When you want to do a radio link, point-to-point link, you select two sites, and you enter the system parameter. So it's a new set of parameter that includes the, let's say, the transmitter power, the receiver sensitivity, the line loss, all the equipment is itself that you use for radio communication, okay, what we call the system stuff. And you give that to the computation engine, and in return you have the path loss between the two sides, and taking into account the power that you have given, you can compute what will be the received signal, the prediction of the received signal. Again, my idea was to help people to compare their prediction to their measurement. So all the default values are based on reliability that correspond to measurement that you will do in the field. So this is why I tweaked the parameter. If you look at the program, you will see that the default reliability is 70%. Because I made a lot of tests around the city and in the forest and the hilly area, and I saw that the program was a bit. In fact, I did not invent the algorithm. It's what we call the Longley-Rice algorithm. It's a long story. Most of it is based on measurement, empirical algorithm, and electromagnetism law. Okay, so it's a mix of many observations and that was put into a program. It's not the best program, the best algorithm. The Longley-Rice maybe is outdated, but there is one quality. It's the only code that is recognized by the American Army, Canadian Army, professional industry. So even if you have a better algorithm, you will have to prove that it is right. You don't want to do that. So when I began to work with Radio Mobile, it was for professional use. And I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to prove to my customer that my calculation was right. I just have to say, I use Longley-Rice. That's it. You know it. And and Longley-Rice is not that bad, even if it's a bit old. It has the quality of being more precise when you are further away. As an example, there is a Canadian version of the program that was in use at our research center in Ottawa. And this version was based on infinitesimal element, okay? And a lot of calculation, mostly pure electromagnetism, Maxwell laws, and very complex calculation. And the problem with that method is if you increase the distance, you have a higher error. The higher the distance, the higher the uncertainty in the answer. And this is the contrary with Longley-Rice. Since Longley-Rice is based on empirical data, the further away you are, the more precise the answer is. And also, if you look at the precision of the database, you will understand that if you are further away, the obstruction becomes smaller compared to the big picture. Okay, so if the quality of the data is so, you will have better prediction on longer distance than short. The only problem is you have to be careful when you sight. If you put your sight and you don't look very well around, you may be not exactly on top of the mountain. You may be on the side, and suddenly you have a wall behind you, which is not there. So that's a kind of fine-tuning that you may have to do, even with the online version. You may have to be sure that you are not in a bad pixel, I would say. So you are buried into the ground.
If you're off just a tiny bit, it could make a big difference.
Yeah.
So I think I appreciate the work you did to make it more simple, because a lot of times engineering software it's great for people who do that for a career, and you can spend all day, every day, trying to understand the intricacies of how complex software works. But for someone who's going to casually use it, you really have to rely on an expert to make a bunch of assumptions for you, like you've done, to make it usable, because we're not going to understand all the ins and outs of it. We just want to punch in the data that we know and hit the button. And frankly, the number that comes out for the link budget is interesting, but you know that when you map that to the real world, it's like, well, there's a variety of things that'll affect that. And to me, the most useful thing, once you look at all the numbers, is to look at the actual cross-sectional plot, because as a ham, you may not understand, the technicalities of the algorithms, but if I'm transmitting from point A to point B and there's a big rock in the way, and I could see that on the path plot, it's like, oh, that doesn't look very good. But if it's a clear line and there's no physical obstruction, then there's no problem. There's a good chance it'll work. So, we kind of operate on a very basic level relative to, I think, the way a lot of.
It's a good observation you're doing there, because I have many people who send me an email about they saw a problem. There is a problem with the program, and they send me a picture of a coverage. I cannot do anything. I cannot troubleshoot a picture of a coverage.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them, please place 2 units, one on the top and one at a location where you think there is a problem, and make a radio path, and you will see why you have a problem. You cannot see that only with a splash of colors. You need to see the radio link to understand. And also the budget of the radio link is only available in the radio link window. So this is a very good point. You have to see that as a radio link calculation only, and coverage is only a multitude of radio.
Right. So one of the things that I don't know how to interpret is, let's say on the plots that I've done in the past, I went from the ground to a repeater site, and if there is no obstruction in the path, life is good. But as it often happens, there's a ridge in the way, and maybe it's not like a big mountain, but it's enough so that the peak of the ridge is in line with the center of the path. So there's going to be some, there'll be signal that'll get over the ridge, but it won't be, 100%. So on the plots, there are envelopes of lines that radiate outward. So could you comment on what do you look for to, if you're going to eyeball a plot like that, and how much obstruction is something that most people could deal with, or how do you interpret those lines that are around it?
This is something that I explained in my conference. When you take the Faraday work has been put into equation by Maxwell, okay? And in the main thing you have to understand is with an electrical current, you can make a magnetic field, okay? And with a magnetic field, you can make electrical current. The nice thing is if you change them, if you vary the electrical current, you will make a variable magnetic field. And a variable magnetic field automatically induces an variable electrical field. So when Maxwell saw that, he says, oh, this thing will propagate. So the real inventor of the radio is Maxwell, because he predicted that the communication will be possible with this based on the law of the electromagnetism. And he even found the speed of light with this equation. So for sure, the invention of the radio is dedicated to Marconi and all these early, much later, because Maxwell worked in the 18th century. It's a long time ago. And the equations are still the base of telecommunication knowledge. It's still up to date. The only thing that came also from that epoch is the Fourier law, the Fourier transform, that were more seen like a nice mathematical stuff for a long time. Fourier was part of the French Revolution, so it's a long time ago, okay? And today, all the telephones are working with fast Fourier transform. So this is what we call the software-defined radio. They are all based on Fourier work. So it's incredible to see that all that mathematics that drives most of the technical stuff today depends on things that were invented on the 18th century.
Can you imagine if they're alive today to see
So to
how
go back
critical all that is?
with this propagation, you see that when you transmit with an antenna, you transmit in all directions. For sure, you have more energy depending on the antenna gain, the type of antenna you have. But this propagation is not on a straight line. It's a space. It look a little bit like a football ball. The energy is higher in the middle, but if you go away from the center, you still have a lot of transmission that goes each around, not only in the center line. So this obstruction you are seeing in the middle, maybe it blocks part of the energy, but you still have a lot of energy above that still can pass.
So I want to share a screen because I've got a couple of plots that I made with
Go ahead.
Radio Mobile. So which kind of illustrate your point. So for those of you listening to the podcast on audio, you really got to go watch the YouTube video to see the graphics because this is really the interesting thing. So we'll do the best we can to describe the graphics here, but bear with us a little bit. So here's a path plot. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a plot. This is between a friend of mine's house, Josh, who was on the show before, and a local repeater site. So this is a pretty good one. So you can, even a layman could look at this and go, well, it looks like there's nothing in the way. So what you were just describing kind of the RF radiation pattern around the center line. Is that like these lines that we see on the screen here?
So first of all, when we work with path like that, we work with two-dimensional plot, okay? In reality, they are three-dimensional. They are, as I said, like a football balloon, okay? But it's a good assumption to use a two-dimensional plot because of the Earth itself. It's a flat Earth that blocks half of the energy. This is what you have here. You have line of sight, but at the limit there is a building in red, about 80% of the path. You see this red vertical spot.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a building, and this building is almost blocking the signal. And you also have another building right next to the right side, the key 70SH. Okay, you see that there is a building right there, which probably caused some loss. In Radio Mobile, the building and the trees are seen as penetration loss. They are not seen as obstruction. Only the ground is seen as an obstruction. So in this case, there is two components for the loss. There is the ground loss caused by the obstruction of the ground, and there is a penetration loss through the building and the trees. In this case, it's only building that are in the way. Or little bit, okay. I had to make some simplification. So I consider only the trees and the building that are within the first Fresnel zone. So the first Fresnel zone is the white line below and above the green line, the first ones. Okay. So if a tree or a building is inside that area, it is calculated as a penetration loss. So as an example, if you look on the left side of the path, okay, you have trees and building on the foot of the mountain, okay? They are not taken into account because they are not in the area between the two white lines, each side of the green line. So this is a simplification to reduce the amount of calculation, and it's fair to do that. Because most of the time the obstruction take it over when you have you are away from the first Fresnel zone. So in this case, you have a line of sight with a little loss of penetration, but you don't have what we call the full line of sight, because if there were no obstruction at all, okay, we will say it's a free space situation, okay? In the case of the free space, you can imagine they are two spaceships that talk together in the openness of space, okay? There is no obstruction in any direction, okay? This is free space. When you are above the ground, that never happens. There is always a portion of the space that is blocked by the ground, okay? And if you look at the effect of these obstruction is you don't have all the energy that you will receive normally if you were in free space. But the nice thing is that the length of the white line increase when you go away from the green, okay? The first white line is the area where all the signal are in phase. If you look at the second white line, they are out of phase.
Okay.
If you look at the third white line, they are in phase. So if you block all the signal that are below the first white line, you will have more energy than if you were in the free space.
Oh,
because
interesting.
You block the out of phase signal with the ground.
Interesting. So if you had a choice of having an obstruction anywhere in the Fresnel zone or not, actually having some obstruction could be beneficial.
It's better to have a Fresnel zone obstruction.
Wow.
In engineering, we say that it's dangerous because due to inversion, if the temperature gradient change, you may have a different refraction that will make it so that at 1 hour in the day, you are in the first Fresnel, but later in the day, you are in the second Fresnel. You don't want that because you will lose communication. This is typically happening if you have a radio path above the water. You will lose signal 2 times a day at when the sun set and the sunrise.
So this is real interesting. A bunch of my friends are microwave operators, and one of them said something one time that I was really surprised by. And I said, well, when you're doing a long microwave shot, do you do it from mountain to mountain, or like I assume you? And they're like, well, we do in the contest, but in the commercial world, a more predictable path is mountain to ground and ground to mountain, as opposed to mountain, because that way you're cutting across the thermal variation. And I never understood really why that would be a thing. I would think mountain to mountain would be better, but he's like, no. You don't want that. You want to go to the ground and then back up to the next mountain.
Okay, so there is a rule that most engineers apply is to let 0.6 of the first Fresnel zone pass. So normally when you drive on the road and you see these dish on the towers, okay, they are not necessarily on top of the tower. One is on top and the other is in the middle or a third. There is a reason for that. They place the antenna so they adjust the white line to be only 0.6. I'm talking about the green line going down to the first white line. Okay? This is what we call the first Fresnel zone clearance. Okay, the other one is obstruction, but below it's clearance. So if you take the first Fresnel zone clearance to the white line, okay, you take 0.6 of that and you try to adjust the obstruction to fit that 0.6. So in your case, I will increase the antenna 8 on the right until I have 0.6 where you have this obstruction. You see there is a little
Yes.
hill in the about maybe 40% of the path, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The left to the right, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But this, you can use that little hill as the limitation or the worst obstruction of your path. Okay? So you increase the antenna 8 on the right until you have the green line to the white line, about 0.6 of that above the little hill.
Wow.
So you have a 0.6 clearance of the first result. We are quite technical here, but this.
Yeah. No, this is fascinating. I mean,
I
this
increase the antenna 8 and I see the signal reduce. This is not possible. No, this is possible.
Yeah.
Because you are playing with out of phase signal.
That I never thought of. That's very counterintuitive. So for those of you who are just listening on the audio, you got to go look at the video so you can see the graphics that we're talking about.
Another example is those amateurs who do balloon launch. Okay,
mm-hmm.
If you send a balloon and you listen to the signal, you have most of the time clearance, a lot of clearance. And suddenly the signal goes up and down. So it depends on those Fresnel zones that become in phase or out of phase, in phase, out of phase. And one of the, let's say, I had when I was working in Netherlands, I met a guy that worked for the national police. And this guy has dedicated a site to Radio Mobile. Remco, his name. And Remco told me he saw that when he launched a balloon. Huh. Everything that this variation of signal was the only explanation he got was from Radio Mobile prediction to explain why the signal was jumping up and down instead of being stable.
Interesting.
With the balloon launch that he was convinced at that point that the program was right. But in fact, this is not part of the Longley Rise. Longley Rise doesn't take into account the line of sight. This is a part of the program that I implemented myself based on the 2-ray method. And so the program has 3 zones of there is line of sight. You have beyond line of sight, which is Longley Rise. And within line of sight, there is a zone where you have ground reflection and direct path. And in between the two, between the Longley Rise zone and the 2-ray zone, there is a progressive mix to don't have a drop, sudden drop in the calculation, because the model are let's see, you have 2 types of calculation that you want to mix together. So you need an overlap zone, and that overlap zone is a weighted zone. Mm-hmm. So if you are on the line of sight, the 2-ray method is predominant. If you move toward the Longley Rise obstruction side, it's the weight of the Longley Rise is higher. So and this is not a very large zone, but this helps to have a smooth transition from one method of calculation to the other.
I want to ask you a quick question. Even though we resolve this all into like effectively a path loss or link budget, is there any appreciable difference in that between receiving and transmitting?
No, the program is only based on the propagation between two sides.
Okay.
It's reciprocal. Okay.
Okay.
But for sure, you have the local noise, the bandwidth, the sensitivity. These are a lot of complex things, but in Radio Mobile, you resolve that by one number. You define the receiver sensitivity. As an example, when you do VHF propagation in urban area, you know that you have a lot of noise coming from computer, machine all around. If you drive on the road, you have intermodulation, name it, okay? So you may consider that your threshold is like 5 microvolt. Anything below 5 microvolt is lost into the noise.
Mm-hmm.
You say, but this is not right because my receiver has a 0.25 microvolt sensitivity. Now,
Right.
that's not the case. The threshold is not the bench test. The threshold is what you get in the field.
Mm.
And you have to take into account the noise, which is the main limiting factor.
So
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So in VHF, you will have to probably put your threshold to more than 1 microvolt. In UHF, you can go below because there is less noise, but you still have noise.
So let's say that the typical FM receiver is going to be, 0.12 microvolts for 12 dB of quieting.
Yeah.
Would you just go with that, or would you?
I will never go with that with a mobile.
Because that's the ideal on the bench in isolation from noise.
When you're mobile, you have noise, you have picket fence effect, you have a fade variation caused by what we call the situation, things that the program doesn't take into account but are there. So like if you pass in front of there is a tree that suddenly appear between you and the repeater, it will affect the signal. So these are all kinds of things that are too precise for the model, but that are there. So you have to use statistics to take them into account. This is how you resolve it in.
So when I put in 0.12 microvolts in my path loss calculation, that was too optimistic.
I never. Most of the time, I use 1 microvolt in UHF. But there are special cases. You have a mounting top repeater in the middle of Rocky Mountains with a solar panel and everything, and you have a preamplifier in the line. Then you can say I have 0.1 microvolt sensitivity. That is possible.
But when you're in the city, forget it.
You don't have that on the mobile side. You have that on the repeater side. Then you have an asymmetrical communication because you don't have what we call the system gain is not the same in both directions. So normally I use the worst case.
Okay.
I hate a repeater that you cannot. People that use 100 watt and more for a repeater, but you cannot. You try 50 watt and you cannot talk to the repeater. I don't like that. I like repeater that when you hear them, they hear you.
Yeah. So I got one other quick question. Since you have the terrain data and you could do the point-to-point, can you also do any kind of multipath prediction, or is that just too many variables? Because you have all the data.
Yeah, the two-ray method is a multipath.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but we don't go. Okay, the problem with multipath is it becomes astronomical calculation.
Yeah.
Because you don't look only in one direction; you have to look in 3 dimensions. Right. On both sides, and you have also to take into account what comes from behind. You have a reflection from behind, so this is too complex. For sure, there are special cases where the program is not right. A good example is you have a face, a rocky face, and you're using the mountain as a reflector. The program cannot see that. And I saw that when I was living in Lac Saint-Jean. We used to drive on the road where you have high mountain all around. And according to the prediction, it was not possible to talk but you had signal. And the nice thing is if you use a quarter wavelength, you have more chance to communicate than with a 3/8 wavelength antenna, because if you have a disk as an antenna gain, you miss the signal that come from above the mountain.
Yeah.
Quarter wavelength receive more energy that may come from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the takeoff angle of the quarter wave.
So we used to have better communication where we are using quarter wavelength than 3/8 wavelength. So that's another, but multipath, yes, for sure, is very, and especially if we are thinking of a program that will use the buildings into calculation. At some point, it will be nice to introduce this higher level of complexity.
I would think if you're trying to figure out path plots in a dense urban environment, like in a downtown with buildings everywhere, that you have to do multipath path prediction, because there's just so many reflections that are going to go on, and you don't want to.
It's different now with those modern radio, because in the past, when you were trying to do communication, and as soon as there were multipath, there was a lot of distortion in the communication, especially with the analog signal. So if you try to listen to a TV station with a rabbit ears in the city, you have a double phase, you see all the reflection in the picture. But with the modern radio that use spread spectrum techniques, what they do is they synchronize on a particular bit in the stream. So even if there is a reflection that come in, it will be rejected because it is not in phase with the what we call the chip you're synchronized with. So the new technology are better into surviving the multipath than we used to have before.
Well, they're probably also using MIMO antennas, and so you have more of a chance of selectively picking out which thing you're going to listen to, as opposed to just a single radiator.
The new radio, what they do is they have multiple receiver with different synchronization, and one of them receive. So you take the situation in terms of phase and in terms of time, where you have the better reception. GPS work like that. In your GPS, the early GPS needed to have a TV station to synchronize with the satellite. They were using the image of the TV station to synchronize the time. We don't need that anymore, because what you do is you have a multitude of radio, each of them looking at a different slot time, and one of them locally receive. So and as soon as one receive, you don't have to wait for synchronization. You don't have to look like try to find where is the signal. You just listen to many radio at the time. Each of them one of them will have a chance to receive will be synchronized, because you have all. This is the nice thing about software-defined radio. You're trying to catch a GPS, and in reality you have maybe 60 repeater running in parallel in your radio that will look for the same GPS, the same satellite. So these are passionate things that if I redo my career, if I was like 50 years younger, I will return to university and specialize in SDR for sure. This is fantastic what we can do with SDR radio.
Yeah, and at the same time reducing the parts count and the cost, and get even more power. Hey, Vince, you use Radio Mobile. What did you use it for?
Our club uses it to predict repeater coverage and to do link path prediction, because our repeater coverage is 13 full-time repeaters. It covers, I hope I'm doing the math right, 40,000 square kilometers, about 22,000 square miles of southern Alberta. It's a phenomenal footprint. And we use it to figure out when we're plotting a new repeater, what sort of gain the antenna will need, so that we understand all of the variables like the path loss and any obstructions that might be in the way. And we can use it. The beautiful thing about Radio Mobile Online, and Roger will correct me if I stray here, we can use it not only for VHF and UHF frequencies, but of course we can use it for the microwave frequencies as well, right? So
yes, the only thing is that, as I said before, the quality of the data may be a deception, because in the online version we are limited to 1 arcsecond,
right,
which correspond to about 30 meters between records.
yeah.
And you can think of a radio link that is between a mountain top and, as an example, an access point and a client, a customer somewhere that are like 30 kilometers away. It's okay to study with 1 arcsecond.
For sure.
If you are in an urban situation, it's not good.
Yeah. And I've been using it, George, to show people what coverage can look like from their handy-talkie. And so there are a few people that live in my area that like to design antennas for the HT and the soda crowd. And they're new to designing antennas. And they're like, I wonder how far this antenna will reach. And I said, well, what's the gain on your antenna? Oh, well, I think it's 7 dB. Okay, well, hey, look, get on a Zoom call with me and let's play around with Radio Mobile Online. And his mind was blown when I did this with him. So I'm referring to my friend Ben, the ham radio rookie, VE6SFX, and I put links in the show notes to a couple of videos. One that Ben did from his point of view about it, and one that I did explaining a really basic version of an explanation, nowhere near as good as Roger's, about Radio Mobile Online for general use. So we use it for a variety of things. We can plan a link. We can take a look at combined repeater coverages to see what our whole network looks like and look for holes in the network. And as I was saying to Roger before we hit the record button, we recently suffered a loss of our hub repeater. We run a hub and spoke repeater network, so everything's got to go through a single repeater to be rebroadcast. It's all pure RF. There's no IP links involved in it. And we lost that site due to a catastrophic fire. Like, it was burned down to the ground. It's in the middle of nowhere, so you don't get a fire truck up there real fast. And we had to, in a hurry, figure out where we could stand up a replacement hub repeater and what coverages we would get. Because all of a sudden our hub has moved 80 miles from where it used to be. So with that kind of a coverage change, you want to start, you don't want to throw stuff in the back of a truck and drive it all over God's green earth and try to plug it in and see what works. You really want to use some modeling software for big sudden changes like that. So that's how we're using it.
Well, I think this is a fantastic application for stuff like that, because you're trying to get an indication of whether something is possible or not. You're not trying to measure to the femto dB about something. I mean, you want to go, oh, by the way, between here and here, is there a path at all? And like, does it look really bad or does it look, promising? And that certainly saves you a lot of work to get an approximation of what it would take. And for that matter, you get into discussion of we're doing a path, we're doing a link, and how much fade margin do we need? How much power do we have to run to get the fade margin, to get the link budget? Do we need a 10-watt link transmitter or a 50-watt link transmitter? It makes a difference. Or how big of an antenna, are we going to need for that?
Well,
this is how I became involved, in fact, by our federation here. They were trying to do radio link between two mountains. They were convinced that it was the solution. And first time I used Radio Mobile, I showed them, no way, there's doesn't pass between these two mountains. And they were putting energy, I mean, traveling a lot, mountain top repeater at 100 kilometers away. They were traveling there every weekend trying to turn the antenna, change the receiver. And for many years, they were losing energy on an impossible link. That Radio Mobile was showing from the beginning, it was impossible. So, and the second thing is the frequency management, because people here were asking for a frequency, and they were blocking the frequency for the whole province. And the guy was living in the middle of a valley where he had about 5-kilometer range, and he was blocking all the province with one frequency. So with Radio Mobile, we were able to prove that it was possible to reuse frequency more and more and make a better use of our precious spectrum.
That's a really good point. I mean, the whole repeater coordination, frequency coordination thing is a big political nightmare. And it's a lot easier to just make broad pronouncements like, you can't be on my frequency because maybe there'll be interference when, it could be highly unlikely.
It's subjective. Exactly. Not based on science or prediction, objective calculation. So what Radio Mobile bring into the amateur world was to remove the subjective part of I have this frequency, and people were selling their repeater with their frequency for another region. It was completely stupid.
Wow.
So you cannot guarantee that the same frequency will be okay.
See, and you missed an opportunity. They could pay you money and you could tweak the algorithm so it looks it's better or worse depending on. Anyway, Thomas, I was thinking in your case where you guys you went through all the hurricane troubles, and there's more and more people in your area looking to use radios, and you're not flat, right? I mean, that's a hilly area. And so the coverage of the repeaters, or just knowing, if someone's on their handy-talkie, like Vince's example, on a handy-talkie at your neighbor's house, can they get to the GMRS repeater? I mean, that sort of stuff would be useful even, in that kind of a situation, I would think.
Yeah, actually, while I've been listening here, I've been on the site and I've added like 5 sites around where I am, and looking at the paths, and it's funny because in your head, geographically and topographically speaking, in your head, you think you know what the profile is between one site and another. Like you think you know the area, and boy, was I wrong on some of these. Like I was looking at, first of all, some of the repeaters I can hit, I can't hit with my HT when I'm standing, a certain amount off the ground, but when I'm using, more wattage with my external antenna, you can change the formulas in there for that stuff. But you really see like, oh, that's the obstacle. There's a real obstacle in the way. And then you can see those path lines. And in fact, mine look really interesting. I was, as I was making these, I was like, wow, I need to have Roger come down here and show me what all this means, because there are multiple kind of vectors that it's showing on some of the mountains. And the like just between me and like other, so I plotted out like 1, 2, 3 repeaters, I think, and then also just a path between me and my buddy Vlado, sort of like you did there with Josh. And I was like, what's in our way? Because we've never been able to make a simplex contact, off of VHF or UHF or anything, no matter what kind of power we were pushing with whatever radios we had here. And of course, I see why. It's because there are like multiple summits and like mountains that are in the way of that, and there just really aren't many good paths. But it's kind of fascinating to look at these profiles and kind of figure this out and look at it. It's
so like in your case, like you'd mentioned that there's more GMRS activity in the area and the more repeaters going on the air. To have a coverage plot of each of those repeaters would be super useful, because you talk to a neighbor who's not like a ham or anything, and they're like, well, can you talk to my house? Well, let's pull out the map and take a look and see where the footprint is. And at least it gives you, like a first order sanity check of, yeah, maybe yes or maybe no, or which would be the best repeater for me, and, look at the different plots.
And it makes a really big difference here on our road because our road's like an upper valley. So you're in like this V shape anyway. So like one person on one side of the road may have extraordinary coverage to the repeater. On the other side of the road, it's the complete opposite. Like they struggle to reach the repeater. But you're absolutely right. And as more and more people are coming on GMRS, people are asking me to like, do you think I could hit the repeater with a handheld from my house? And I've never been to their house before. But once I've got the geo coordinates of the GMRS repeater, then at least I can have some kind of educated guess if they're gonna, if they'll stand a chance when they're at their house. But this is really fascinating. It's fascinating for me to look at these, the plots I've made are, and I was just doing them all for like 2 meters. I even thought like, why is it that I can, I think about some of the where I live here, I struggle to receive some FM stations, broadcast stations that are in the Asheville area, like not physically, not that far away from me as the crow flies, but I can receive much better some stations from Charlotte, which is like almost a 2-hour drive away from here. But it all has to do with altitude and line of sight and those, like the effect that Roger was talking about earlier, of those being pretty nice and clear and working pretty effectively for where we are. So it's a really fascinating way to visualize things when you have some interesting topography.
So if you are interested, I can show you what I have in mind when I talk about frequency coordination, okay?
Yeah.
Let me share my screen. Give me a second.
This is one of the topics that this is where having a YouTube option's kind of nice. It's hard to explain, the plots and everything. It's hard to really kind of describe this.
I will try to explain what I do. Okay, I hope you see it well.
We see a map.
Yeah, okay, I will put it easy. So it's in French, but you can select as an example a frequency, okay? So these are repeater on the US side. These are in Quebec.
Oh, wow.
You want to know if you can use, suppose I want to put a repeater in Trois-Rivières here, okay? Well, you see that you don't, if you want to have a large coverage repeater, you cannot use that frequency.
Yeah.
Okay, so change the frequency. Wow. You see, you see, there are not many frequencies that I can use.
So this map is showing very dynamically the footprint, the propagation footprint of all these repeaters.
These are, each time I have a new repeater, I have an automatic calculation of the coverage, and I keep only the picture. So this is why it's so fast. It doesn't have to do the
calculation. It doesn't have to calculate anything.
It's always the same repeater, so you don't need to redo the calculation.
This is a really cool tool in and of itself. So you see,
you don't have a frequency yet.
Yeah.
I try. Oh, this one, no. Oh, I have a free. Oh, this is not really in the frequency plan. Okay, let's go back in the.
So he's flipping through different frequencies and finding where there may be an open spot.
This one I may have to because sometimes predictions are too optimistic. Maybe I can use that frequency here. Around here, okay? There is a possibility. The first one that I see yet, but there are not many good frequency. Again, we have it's another side that maybe I can use the frequency for the city of Trois-Rivières, okay? As you can see, this is what I call frequency coordination, because you don't, in a few minutes, you can find if there is one, if a good frequency for a new repeater. And we know how bad it is to get a frequency at some location. If you want to put a repeater in the north, no problem. A lot of choice. But if you are in a crowded, you look here, how many repeaters are on the same frequency?
Yeah, there's a whole line of them in the Northeast.
I'm playing with this on my computer screen right now. Roger, how long before this will have all of the repeaters in North America in it?
I had some discussion with people in California, but at some point I will be pleased to help if someone wants to build that for North American. But
because
I did it for Quebec, and that was enough for me.
But yeah, there is a ton of work in here. I'm very clear about this. But I mean, we just happen to be really good friends with Repeater Book Guy.
Okay.
Which is a tremendous source of data for this. George knows Garrett very well.
Yeah, but I'm open to talk to them, but I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, we can make that connection. The question there is the lat long elevation data in the repeater book database correct? And that's up to every individual to put the data in there.
Yeah, people put their home address for the repeater.
Exactly. You know, a lot of times it's not the actual location for security reasons.
This database has been fine-tuned by a friend of me, which was working for weeks, looking at each repeater, if this was the amateur itself, the address, or the real site, and it's not only a huge amount of information, but a lot of work to get in touch with the people and get the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. So it's got to be good data to be useful. Yeah. But having said that, most frequency coordination bodies, they all require the coordinated station to have precise lat long elevation data in the coordinator's database. Whether they publish that or not, it's a separate question. So what goes into a public database? You need
to have some kind of a reciprocal agreement between clubs and even private owner. For sure, there is let's say, gentleman agreement involved here.
So when you look at all the work you put into this project and you look towards the future, is there a list of a few things that you would like to add to the functionality of the webpage, or do you think it's kind of as far along the path as you want to take it?
I would say the latest, while we are there, maybe I can show you the new version that I did for the Linux-based version. You can see the difference. I will try to be short. So it's on our Federation side. And what's wrong? Yee. There's a bug.
Hard to imagine.
Okay, I have it. Okay, so oof. So you see there are less buttons instead of new site. Okay, first of all, let's put that in English. It will help. Okay.
So we're gonna walk through the UI here. So again, for those of you listening on the podcast, you definitely need to dial in on the video to see the software in action.
I will put a link to the video in the show notes.
Thank you.
Okay. But this link is only available for members of the Quebec Amateur Radio Federation. But I would love to do one for Canadian Association as well. But the problem is you need a web server with your own. We are talking about terabytes of data. So you don't find that on any provider. You need probably to have your own computer located in the provider house. So instead of 3 buttons you have only 2 for the site. You don't have multiple sites anymore. It's multiple display that cover all the multiple, okay? And if I go to multiple display, I can see, as an example, I'm missing a button. There is something wrong with the display. I don't see all my buttons.
This is like every demo I've ever done in my career. It always goes that way.
Try again.
Now, this is the Linux backend that we're looking at?
Yeah. Okay, forget about that. Let's say you want to do a coverage, okay? I want to do...
Oh, there's Tim Hortons in the list.
Okay, let's say I want to do a coverage from this place. I will put an antenna quite high.
Princess Auto too.
This is 17. Okay, submit. You see how fast it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
normally
on the back end's working
with the normal version. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is a virtual machine running Linux. It's not even directly on the computer. I didn't look at the...
Now, you set it for 5.7 gigahertz and a 70-meter high antenna.
Okay. You see the reflection?
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So this is the way it looks. And you can, as an example, show the topography that was used for the calculation.
Wow.
You can see the land cover that was used. I can remove the radio coverage to better see. Population.
Wow, that's
antenna
cool.
pattern. In this case, it's omnidirectional, but so
there's a lot of detail here. My goodness.
That's a lot of
You see, and if we modify this coverage, just to show you, everything is minimal.
I think that was really brilliant because for so many of us, I mean, we don't have the time or understanding to make it more complicated, and it's plenty accurate enough for anything we would need. So it's very, very useful.
So that's the new version, and that's the one that I would like to, as an example, if the Canadian Amateur Radio Federation wants to open a website dedicated free and to all Canadians, I will be pleased to install it on their server.
Wow.
I might know a guy there.
Yeah. Rack. Yeah, I think you probably do.
Same in the US. My code is not secret. It's just that I want to control it.
Yeah, sure.
For sure.
You've done a brilliant job.
The idea about the new version in Linux. It's a much more efficient algorithm.
So So is there anything that we didn't cover that we should touch on before we wrap up? You're probably thinking, man, it's getting pretty late on the East Coast.
Yeah, I'm an East Coaster too, for what it's worth, Roger.
So I think that it was not a presentation like I do normally officially with how you place a unit or you do a radio link. This is more like a general conversation we had tonight. Maybe at some point, but it could be more. But there are some quite good presentation on the on YouTube done by many peoples. So maybe if you put some links, for those who want
for some tutorials.
To have
So I think we should go ahead and wrap up. I really want to thank you not only for coming on and telling us about it and exposing more people to this, but really thank you so much for the effort you put into making this available for free to the community. It's really an amazing resource.
Yeah, what an awesome
That's
resource.
a wonderful gift. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But don't forget that personally, I was rewarded a lot. When I was working as a professional and I visited France, Germany, everybody knew Radio Mobile. It was my
Yeah.
business card.
That's
I'm not
great.
I didn't
surprised.
need any presentation. Everybody knew me all around. Everywhere
That's
I go, in
fantastic.
Greece, in Netherlands, in name it, all the country in the world.
And now North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So Vince, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Roger, thank you so much. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for your gift to the amateur radio community. It's a legacy that will live on, and I'm so delighted that you agreed to come on and talk with us this evening. Thank you.
Thomas?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. This was absolutely fascinating, and now I've got this new toy that I can play with to see all the different elevations and things that are in the way. For me, it's less buildings and more just like mountains and things around me, and it's really fascinating. I'm going to be playing with this also just to see what it looks like in my coverage when I'm hitting repeaters, and but also we will use this to help people discern like when their GMRS signal may work really well from their house if they got a GMRS radio to hit our new repeater here in the Swannanoa area. So thank you so much. I mean, this is a Herculean effort to keep something like this going, and we appreciate the fact that you just throw it out here to the amateur radio world to use.
Yeah, there is a problem with the popularity is that some people abuse.
Mm.
There was at some point I discovered that one user was using 20 instances of calculation in parallel. So I had to you can only have one account, one session per account now.
Yep.
Yes.
And I still found some abuse. People were doing like thousands of calculation for commercial, they use a closest amateur frequency or whatever. So then what I did is I put this number that you have to enter below the
yes.
Yeah.
to try to stop those people who want to do business with our freeway.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a prediction that after the show drops, your server is going to be hammered, because I think there's a lot of listeners who are going to want to go play with it.
Why it would be nice if we could spread the server instead of one location, because you don't have to share the resource.
Well, I think one suggestion I would have for listeners is if any of you guys are in radio clubs that have a repeater, which is like all of you, then the first thing I'd do is I'd go do a coverage map of my repeater, because that's something that everybody would find useful. And so certainly that would be a great tool to have. And then, of course, do a little bit of a plots from your home and those kind of things. So you can, as I almost said wasted, but I've gainfully utilized many hours of time, as you can tell, coming up with plots, especially in an area that I'm not familiar with, that I moved into. So it's very helpful.
And perhaps if the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Amateur Radio Relay League, or any of the other large clubs around the world are listening, Roger is looking for other sites to host this wonderful resource that he has given to us for free. So I strongly encourage you to get in touch with him via the contact in our show notes, and we would be happy to connect you to.
You know, if we just need data center bandwidth, I know a guy.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
It's data center bandwidth and terabytes of data.
And a serious amateur that represent really the many amateurs, not a private gang, I want to have an official representative.
No, that's my shout out to the clubs. I know we have listeners in New Zealand, Australia, Britain, and many other places. United Kingdom. So if you've got some contacts at your National Radio Association, please connect them and let's see what we can do to spread the word on this.
So thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure meeting you, and hopefully we'll have a chance to do it again sometime. So thanks very much. And any parting comments, Roger, for the listeners?
It was I'm sorry for my English sometimes, but if you stop yourself from speaking because you think you have a big accent, I know that sometimes I may sound a little bit weird, but
no, see, the problem here is being in the U.S., whenever we hear a foreign accent, we think they sound smarter than we do. So it's really kind of okay. So you're good. You're good. Okay. Anyway, thanks so much for coming on. And so from all of us at the Ham Radio Workbench, 73.
73 to all.
73, and as Smitty says, be good humans.
À la prochaine.